Hi, I'm Ashley and welcome to my channel. So today we are going to be doing the mid-year book freakout challenge because believe it or not, we're already halfway through the year. Today is June 26th, we're almost in July. I don't know how that happens, but here we are. I just feel like time just keeps going by faster and faster every year. So our first question is best book you've read so far this year. So this is a really hard question because so far this year I've read 43 books and so many of them were amazing. I started off the year in January with a 5-star read, which was Forging Silver into Stars. This is a spin-off series to the Cursebreaker series, and this one follows a minor character in that one, Taicho, and 2 other characters, and this one was just amazing. And then in February, I finally got to reading House of Sky and Breath, and last year I read Crescent City for the first time, and I loved it so much, and it ended up being one of my favorite books of the year. And this one was another 5-star read for me. And then in March, I finally got around to reading The Dark Artifices, which I had originally planned to read these last year in 2022, but just never got around to it. So I finally read them and they were amazing, of course. And then recently I read some romances, Part of Your World, and Emily Henry's new book, Happy Place. Love both of those. But I'm gonna have to say that my favorite book of the year so far has been The Night Circus. And I actually borrowed that one from the library, so I still need to buy my own copy. But that was just a book that I've heard about for such a long time, and I was actually really scared to read it because it seemed like people either loved it or hated it, and I very much ended up loving it. So that book followed Celia and Marco, 2 magicians who end up in this competition, and essentially them partaking in this competition leads to the creation of the Night Circus. And while the back of the book pitches the book as a romance, and while there is romance in it, it's so much more than that. It's just about as much about Celia and Marco's romance as it is about the creation of the Night Circus, the people who created it, and then everyone who's involved in the circus. And it's kind of like a whole big found family. And I just loved it so much. And I also loved the format and the way it was written because it was very interesting in that you do have chapters from Celia and Marco's point of view, but then you also get chapters from the point of views of the people who helped put together the circus. There are also dated chapters, and there are chapters from a certain character's perspective that are dated in the future. So it's very interesting to try to piece everything together. And there's also chapters written from the perspective as though you are an attendee of the circus, which I also found very interesting. And overall, I just loved everything about that book. So the second question is the best sequel you've read so far this year. So surprisingly, I haven't read too many sequels yet this year, which is surprising because usually I'm reading a lot of series. So the ones I did read this year, as I mentioned earlier, House of Sky and Breath, the sequel to House of Earth and Blood. And then I also read the second book in the Defy the Night series, Defend the Dawn. And then, of course, all the Dark Artifices books. And while I did really enjoy these 2, I kind of feel like I enjoyed the first books of these 2 just a little bit more than the sequels. So I'm going to have to go with my favorite sequel so far this year being the 3rd book in the Dark Artifices series, Queen of Air and Darkness. This was just the perfect finale to an amazing series, and I just loved it so much. So question number 3 is new release you haven't read yet but want to. So this book isn't quite out yet, but it's coming out next month, July 11th, so that's really soon. And the book is The Only Purple House in Town. And I actually just learned about this one not too long ago, and as soon as I read the back, something about it really made me want to read it. So essentially it sounds like it's about this girl who ends up inheriting this house from her aunt, and she ends up renting the house out to other people, but in the description of it, it says that they aren't all humans, and that just pulls me in right away. So I'm like, ooh, is there going to be some supernatural elements? Are we going to have vampires or something? also staying at this B&B, so that is what's making me really want to read it, is that mystery right there. And also, there's also going to be romance involved because the description also mentions a character named Ellie who is gonna apparently end up staying at the B&B, and it sounds like he has never like really found a place where he belongs in life, and this might actually be a place where he belongs, and that just sounds so heartwarming and cozy, and it just sounds so fun, and I'm super excited to read it. So question number 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So this one is a no-brainer. It is A Curse for True Love, which is coming out in October. So the Once Upon a Broken Heart series is just one of my favorite series of all times. So is the Caraval series, which is what this one is a spin-off of. And I love it so much that I have way too many copies of the first 2 books. So these are all my copies of Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is the first book in the series. And then these are my copies of the second book in the series, A Ballad of Never After. So yeah, I have a lot of copies. Too many copies? Probably, but oh well. So yeah, that series is just so magical, and I love it so much. And if you haven't read it and you like fantasy and you like morally gray characters and a lyrical writing style, you should definitely check it out. Question number 5, the biggest disappointment. So this one actually makes me really sad, and there isn't like, I haven't read a book this year that I haven't liked or have hated, but there is one that kind of disappointed me and let me down a little bit, and it still makes me really sad thinking about it, because there were parts of it that I loved, but then there was just one part that just made me not love it, and that was Hotel Magnifique. So this book, when I read the description, I was super excited because it sounded really similar to Caraval, which is one of my favorite series. And this book was about this magic hotel where it only appears every so often. And if you get to go there, it's just this magical experience. And it's apparently the only place where magicians can safely practice their magical power. And so our main character in this book, her and her sister get jobs at this hotel. So that's how they get to go. And I love the whole atmosphere of the hotel. I loved like the whole overarching plot of it. But the one thing that kept me from loving it was the main character. So the main character, she had this character flaw, and it's one of those character flaws that is not my favorite. And it's when a character just keeps making reckless decision after reckless decision after reckless decision, and that is what she kept doing, and it just bothered me so much because I was like, is this really the best possible option right now? I was like, can't you think of something that doesn't have so many bad consequences? And like a lot of times she would make these bad decisions and then bad things would happen because she made these decisions. And I can see that sometimes like a reckless decision is necessary, you must do it, and that does happen at the end of this book. Like she does one that is reckless, but it makes sense in the situation. But there was other times throughout the book where it just didn't make sense. There seemed like there was better options, but she didn't explore those options. And there is a minor character in this book who is like one of my favorite characters, and she is doing pretty much the same thing, looking out for the ones that she loves and cares about, and she does it in smarter ways and in ways that aren't as reckless. So because of her like recklessness, she just ended up frustrating me so much, and I was hoping she would get better over time, and I really wanted to like her character because I wanted to love this book, but I just couldn't. It just didn't work out. I did finish the book, and she did get a little better at the end, and overall I enjoyed the book, but because of that character flaw that she had that just frustrated me, I don't think I'll be able to read it again, unfortunately. But that's just my opinion. Like maybe that's just a me thing. So like if you still want to read this book, like, or you love this book, then that's awesome, because I wanted to love it, but I just couldn't. So question number 6 is biggest surprise. So my biggest surprise of the year, Fourth Wing. I'm sure a lot of people have already heard about this because it's been around everywhere lately because it exploded in popularity. But this book, so I didn't know anything about this book until one day when Amazon just randomly recommended it to me out of the blue, or Amazon just like knows me too well, knows what books I like apparently. And this was before I heard anything about it. It was like a couple months before it was coming out, and I saw it, and the first thing I was like, ooh, it has a pretty cover. And then I was like, oh, the sprayed edges. And then I read the description. I was like, oh, dragons, a school for dragon riders? Yeah, like that sounds like something I'll really like. Sign me up. And then so I didn't pre-order it right away because I tend to think about things for too long before I actually do it. And then Barnes & Noble had their pre-order sale about a week before this book was coming out. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pre-order it because I can get it on sale. So I pre-ordered it, and I am super glad I did because I just enjoyed this so much. It was just one of those books that grabs hold of you at the beginning and doesn't let you go, and you have to keep flipping those pages to find out what's going to happen next. And it was just like such a roller coaster of a ride from start to finish, and I just really enjoyed it. And I'm super excited to read the sequel when it comes out. Question number 7, favorite new author. So for this one, I am gonna have to go with Abby Jimenez. So this is the first book of hers I've read, but I had seen her books, especially this one, on Instagram a lot last year. And then again, recently this book started showing up again. And I was just about ready to take a break from fantasy books and read some contemporary romance to switch things up a bit. So I was like, oh, this is the perfect time to read this. And I'm so glad that I did because I ended up loving this book. So I borrowed this from the library, but I am definitely going to have to buy myself my own copy. And I'm definitely going to need to read her other books. And I know there's a sequel that came out recently about this main character's best friend. So I'm definitely going to have to read that. Question number 8, newest fictional crush. So for this one, I am going to have to go with Prince Darjin, or Jin, from Under Darkened Skies, a fantasy book that I read this month. And he was just like one of those super nice and kind guys, but you also don't want to mess with what he cares about. And I just loved him so much, and he stole my heart. And if you are looking for a story that has elemental magic and has a slow burn romance, which is friends to lovers, and you're looking for a story that has good also like anxiety representation, then I would definitely check out From Under Darkened Skies. Question number 9, your newest favorite character. So again, I'm gonna have to go with a character from Under Darkened Skies, and that's our main female protagonist, Astrea. And she is just a character that felt so real and relatable. And she's also a librarian, and she's also the childhood friend of Jin, who I mentioned before as my newest fictional crush. And I could just relate to Astrea so much because she's one of those characters that cares so much about what others think, and she doesn't want others to see her as like weak. And overall, it was just like great getting to see her like work through like her anxiety and realizing that she can lean on these other people and that they won't see her as weak because she's having these anxieties. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry. So I don't really cry when reading or watching sad movies. Like the closest I'll come to is like my eyes getting watery and tearing up a little bit. I'm gonna have to say that the saddest book that I've read so far this year has been the second book in the Dark Artifices series, Lord of Shadows. So Cassandra Clare got me again. And the end of this book, I could see that something bad was going to happen. I was bracing myself for something bad to happen, but then it happened, and I was still completely unprepared and totally devastated. So yeah, this one, saddest one so far this year. So question number 11, book that made you happy. So this one is going to volume 1 of The Saint's Magic Power is Omnipotent. So this book has an anime adaptation, and that anime adaptation is one of my favorite anime is just so cute and wholesome and feels like a warm hug. And this book lived up to its adaptation. It was just as cute and sweet and wholesome as the anime. And reading this just put me in such a happy and peaceful mood. And I would recommend this if you like anime. Just be aware that since this is a light novel and it's translated from Japanese to English, that the writing style isn't like the greatest. Like in the beginning, there is a lot of telling as opposed to showing, but it does get a little bit better over time. And I found that I did adjust to the writing style and it didn't really bother me by the end. But yeah, so this is a book that made me happy. Question number 11, most beautiful book you have acquired so far this year. So for me, that is going to Heart of the Sun Warrior. And this is the Fairy Loot edition, and it is just gorgeous. And it's really not a surprise that this one is so pretty because the first book, Daughter of the Moon Goddess, the Fairy Loot edition of this one is also absolutely gorgeous and one of my prettiest books. So yeah, that has been my prettiest book so far this year. Number 13 is what books do you still need to read this year? And for me, well, there's a lot of books I want to read. But 3 books that I want to get to this year are 3 of Margaret Rogerson's books, which are Vespertine, Sorcery of Thorns, and then An Enchantment of Ravens, which I don't own yet, but I will get hold of that at some point. And I've just heard so much about her books over the years. And since I joined Bookstagram, especially Sorcery of Thorns seems one that a lot of people seem to love and talk about a lot. And I'm super excited to finally read this one and 2 of her other books as well. So yeah, those are my answers to the mid-year freak out book tag. Let me know down below if you have read any of the books I mentioned, or let me know what books you're looking forward to reading or what has been some of your favorite books of the year so far. Just let me know down below. I would love to know. So thank you for watching. And now I'm gonna go clean up my big mess of books I just made. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.